Hello there, welcome to Inquiring Minds. My name is Doug and I'm back with another Pen Resurrection Sunday video. The pen for resurrection today is this beautiful silver pearl Parker Vacumatic Debutante. You might not be able to tell scale in here, but here is a regular sized Parker Vacumatic, and you can see how much smaller the Debutante is. In fact, here is a Conway Stewart 540 Dinky, and these are considered extremely small pens, and look at that Debutante is not much smaller. I've been wanting to get at this little pen for a while now, and I kind of held off doing this restoration because I was waiting for some tools from Scott at the Inky Nib. I had a telephone conversation with him a few weeks ago, and he showed me this new device that he's got for sale. The Inky Nib, it looks like a revolver, and as I understand it, it's actually for melting and softening dental resins for dentists. I guess they put vials or glass or something full of material inside here and heat them to different temperatures. That's perfect for putting a barrel in there to soften up a section or a vacuumatic pump to a specific temperature instead of using a heat gun. So I'm going to give this a try. I'm heating it to 50 degrees Celsius right now because I want to melt the shellac and not the celluloid. So we'll see how well that works. And he also sent me this. It looks like a pen. It's not. It is an inspection camera with a little light at the front and that tiny little camera so we can inspect inside of caps and barrels and things like that. So I'm looking forward to using that. And he sent me the new version of his shellac pen. This has much larger capacity, and I found this really invaluable in keeping the brush soft and dialing up just the right amount of shellac with this little piston mechanism. Very convenient little tool from Scott Paley at the Inky Nib. So we're going to triage this little pen and see what it needs. I've had this for quite a while, so I can't even remember what I paid for it, but I got it off eBay. So let's go through the pen bit by bit and see what it needs. So now I've got my magnifier eyes on. I can see a little bit more closely. There's the top finial. Looks like it's in good shape, and the clip is the silver color without a blue diamond, and it's very short compared to a regular size Parker clip. There is a little bit of corrosion around there. I'm not sure how well that'll polish up. There's some corrosion around the cap band, single cap band. Let's take a look, see whether we can find the date on this. There's a date code right there, or I can find it here. It looks to me like a 7 with a single dot. That would be the third quarter of 1947 for this Debutante. There's quite a bit of modeling on the celluloid and a lot of age underneath the clip, but that should all polish out nicely. No major gouges. See, there's a flaw right there that looks like, well, let's take this off and find out. Yeah, a lot of age to that, and that's really sticky. I don't think there's a, I can see through this. There's nice transparency. See through the barrel, there's really nice transparency there. Yeah, there's no sack in there that to speak of, but there's a bit of a gouge right there. I'm not sure that I can get that out of that, but we'll polish this all up together with some micro mesh and get that all even. The silver pearl celluloid looks terrific. It's really chatoyant. In this state, where it's all grimy and everything, it still looks magnificent. Look at that, how chatoyant that is. Beautiful. So we'll have to take that pump out of there. So that might require some heat from my new heat machine. And let's uncap the pen and see what the nib looks like. Well, under my loupe I can see it's misaligned. Let's get in closer so you can see. It's misaligned slightly, but it looks like the tipping is very firmly intact. There's no waft. Well, there's a little bit of a wow right there. That's why it's probably out of alignment. There's a little bit of a wow there, so I might do some straightening on that. That side's straight. This side has a little bit of a bump in it. So I'll straighten that out a little bit. I probably can't get this. Oh, look, it's coming off. Sometimes you don't require any heat, and there's another reason why I like these Parker Vacumatics, because they had a screw-in section that you didn't need to shellac down or glue down. Well, now it's time for our inspection camera, I think, to see inside that little barrel. So I have to switch apps here to record. So there's some video of the inside of the barrel, and you can see when I press the plunger, there's no sack attached to that at all. It's completely desiccated. And when I press it upside down like that, you can see all remnants of that sack come pouring out. So now we get out our Vacumatic pump remover, again from the Inky Nib. And there is our small collet. And that thread is pretty gnarly.
Oh, gnarly!
Might want to silicone that up a little bit. Yeah, threads are pretty damaged, so that's not going on very well. I want to make sure it doesn't cross thread. See, look, someone's tried to grab that with some pliers. Not good. And the celluloid in there has reacted accordingly. Yeah, so those threads are slightly damaged as well. I'll put a little bit of silicone oil on those threads just to help the collet slide, and hopefully it'll grip as well. So maybe the aluminum will get the threads in the right channel. A little bit of silicone grease, and I'm working it very slowly until it goes all the way down. And it's working. What do you know? Look at that. Now we can tighten down on that collet and see whether we can unscrew that barrel without any heat. I might just heat it up a little bit so that I'm not damaging that. If I heat it up a little bit, then maybe the celluloid won't crack. And this isn't a job for the new heater, this is a job for the old heater. That's turning better. There we go. So now, oh, that sack is falling out again. Now we have to push it through, get it through that little lip that's on there. If you pull that, it's just going to break it. Break off that little celluloid stem. I'm just going to use a little knockout block rod, try to push down on that. So I soaked both the cap and the barrel in my ultrasonic machine in pen flush, 9 parts distilled water and 1 part ammonia, liquid ammonia, to try to get this pump out. You can see the remainder of the sack is all around right where it attaches on the inside there. It squeezes it against the barrel, and that had solidified. So I soaked it for a while. And then I just put the barrel down on this Phillips screwdriver to try to get a nice purchase on that pellet right there like that inside the barrel, and just gave it some equal pressure to try to push it out without damaging it. And it finally, after a lot of gentle pushing, it finally gave in. The key to this is gentle pressure, because that celluloid will crack. So now the pump is in pretty good condition, as is that cup. There are no breaks in that ebonite cup at all. So I'm going to clean this remnants of sack off of that little ramp right there, and we'll drill that pellet out of there so we can attach a new diaphragm. In the meantime, after soaking and soaking, this top finial won't budge. And so I'm reticent to try to force it because there are no deep abrasions in it. I can probably polish up that cap without taking that clip off of there. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to soak it a little bit more to get all the old ink out of there. But the next step is to get that nib out of there and get it polished up and aligned properly. Breather tube comes right out. So I'm putting it in my little tray of stuff that I don't want to lose. Put the pump in there as well. I'll put the barrel in there and the cap. There we go. And we will soak this for a while and then knock it out with our Bill's knockout block. And here we have my knockout block, Bill's block. Thank you, Bill. And the nib unit that I've soaked in pen flush for about 10-15 minutes. So most of the extraneous ink is out of there. We find the right slot, just enough clearance for the nib to go through, and then we find a rod that is the right size for the Deb, and that looks like the medium one is the right size. It'll knock the block out without touching the inside of that section. So we need to gain some height here, and we'll tap it out. Success. And there's our nib. You see it's got the Parker arrow. It says Parker USA, .7 dot. So that's the second quarter of 1947. So this is a little bit younger than the body of the pen. And an R. I do not know what that R stands for, but this is a pretty normal looking nib. And it has that little waver in it right there that I'm going to try to flatten out a little bit with my nib block and my little nib roller. Let's take a look at the feed. There's the ebonite feed. Channels look good. No markings on it. We'll polish that up as well so that smooth side there is nice and shiny, and the section looks to be in good shape. We'll polish it up. It's got a few marks on it. Polish that up with some polishing compound. Soak it again to get more ink out of it now that the feed's gone, and we're good to go. So I think I've got that nib straightened out. Put it up against the feed like that, and it looks pretty good. One thing I've noticed, however, is that the nib slit is slightly off center, and so the tipping is slightly asymmetrical, but we'll see how that works. So now I'm going to put it on my jeweler's polish cloth and see how bright we can get it. It's the beautiful thing about gold. Doesn't matter how old it is, it can be shined up like it's brand new. 1947, folks. And you may well ask, and well you may, but Professor, why would you polish the underside of that nib? Well, just to make it clean, number one, and number two, the more shiny and clean and polished the underside of that nib is, the better the ink will flow through the feed and to the nib. There you have it. And while we've got the polish cloth out, let's see what we can do with that silver cap band and silver clip. And you see this, it's starting to slip. You see that? It spins. And that's because celluloid shrinks over the years and the metal does not. It's not really going to go anywhere, so I don't think there's anything I need to do with it. But it polished up pretty good. I'm going to polish in this direction instead of spinning it. And let's see what I can do with that clip. It's not in too bad shape. Let's see how much nicer I can make it. That's looking pretty bright. I'm surprised. I'll probably put a little bit of metal polish on there as well. Get some of the crevices clean. Looking pretty good. Look at that. So because I can't get the clip off, I'm going to have to mask that off and the cap band as well when I'm polishing this up with some micro mesh. There's not a lot of gouging that I can find anywhere on this cap, so I'm going to go with a very light micro mesh to start with. You don't need to go to the heaviest micro mesh that you've got. I'll probably just start with, say, 3200 grit and go up from there on both the cap and the barrel. And the barrel doesn't have, well, I spoke too soon. There's a nice big gouge out of the barrel right there, and that's deep. And it's close to the imprint. So that's going to be a challenge. We have to avoid losing the imprint, which is pretty deep on this pen, which is pretty good. But I'm going to have to dig into that with some 400 grit sandpaper and try to get that gouge out first, and then go up through all the grades on the barrel. And of course I'll attach the pump mechanism to it as well, so we get a nice even seam with all that micro mesh there. So because there are no major gouges on the cap, I decided to go ahead and try the polishing compound first to see whether I can get all the micro abrasions out. If not, maybe just a light sanding with some very, very light micro mesh, maybe 6,000 to 8,000 to 12,000, something like that. Let's see how it does with the rubbing compound first. And I've masked this off because I thought I was going to micro mesh. If you were just polishing, I wouldn't worry about that polish getting on that area of the pen. In fact, we'll just polish up the top finial, the polishing compound. You can see it immediately does a great job. Yeah, I got a few abrasions here, just tiny abrasions. So I'm going to have to go at it with some micro mesh. Let's see whether we can do it with some 6,000 first. 6,000, 8,000, 12,000. Let's see whether the 6,000 will get that abrasion out. You probably can't even see it. No, I can't find it again. There it is. Okay, now I don't think I can see that abrasion anymore. It's looking pretty good. So that's actually a very fast way of doing things. I'm going to pull this masking off of here, and we can polish up the rest of that cap. There. So that's actually not a bad way of doing it. If you notice that you don't have a lot of gouges in your celluloid, then you don't need to go that aggressively with the micromesh. The barrel will be another story, however, and I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to resack this first so I can put the blind cap back on in the proper orientation, and then we'll go at that barrel with some micromesh. But while I've got the polishing compound here, let's polish up the section as well. I'll put that right back on the barrel. There we go. Makes it easier to polish. And that section's now looking pretty good too. Look at that. Easy as cake. So I've run into a typical problem with the Vacumatic plunger pump mechanism. I've scraped off all the old sack and everything, but this spring is a little bit damaged. The pellet retainer is actually in really good shape, that little ebonite cup. But I've decided that I'm going to try to repair this later. These are pretty standard size. There's the regular size and then the major size. And the regular size fits standard Vacumatics and Debutante Vacumatics. So I've got another unit that I had broken. You see that cup is all broken. That retainer is no good anymore, so I have to get that off of there. And I bought a couple of modern ones to go on. But I've not done this before, but this is a good learning experience. What I do know is that that ebonite pellet retainer is held onto that celluloid shaft by a very strong adhesive. So you can't heat it because you'll melt the celluloid. So you have to sort of chip it away and get it off of there, maybe with a Dremel tool, with an X-Acto knife. But the first thing I want to do is relieve that spring from continuing to push on it. So it sits with the end of the spring into a little slot right there into the celluloid shaft. So I'm going to try with my little eye something that is springy. I'm going to try to get, or maybe I'll use this. Time to get out the dental picks. So I'm going to push that spring back with one hand like that and try to hook that spring out of there without giving up blood samples. Yeah, this is too much for my regular eyes. I gotta use my superhero eyesight here. The built-in light. That's better. Now I can see. I can see clearly now. My eyes are dim. There we go. This goes shooting across the room. I'll probably get a dental pick in the eye.
Well, I'm dying to be the first one to see a fountain pen right under whipped cream.
Now you take the fountain pen and place it in here.
And put the paper in thusly.
And pour the cream over all. Now turn the motor on to low.
Ow! 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 Oh!
There. Get that hooked under there. Then I can use my tweezers. I don't know how much of that you saw, but I relieved the tension on the spring. There's lots of glue on that. You can see it looks like a slot screwdriver inside there. It's not. It's just split. The celluloid is split. I had to go into my tool room and get some serious pliers here. And I'll grind this up and come back to you when it's done. Okay, I sort of chewed away at it with my wire cutters here. And the last bit just popped right off. So that's great. So I'm going to scrape that a little bit with my X-Acto blade to get it nice and clean. Any remnants of that old glue off of there. So we got to crazy glue that back on, cyanoacrylate glue, CA glue, and then put that spring back in. Okay, so I cleaned off the stem of that celluloid rod. I've fit the new pellet retainer on the end, but I've not pushed it all the way down. I'm going to, just with a toothpick, add a little bit of CA glue, crazy glue right there, and then press the cup all the way down to let it set. There, now we'll push it all the way down and then let that set. Okay, so I've got the pellet receptacle attached to the plunger stem again. It's glued in, and I've got the spring attached again. So this pump should work perfectly. So we got to put a new diaphragm on it. Here I've got a Deb size diaphragm, and I've got my pellet pusher, and we're going to push that right in. Well, let's cut some of that off to begin with. So there, that pellet's right into the pellet pusher, and I can take my X-Acto blade, push it into the groove that Scott has made in this pellet pusher from the Inky Nib, and cut it exactly to length. Just feel with my fingernail, that groove is right there, and just roll it around in that groove, just like that. Clean that edge up just a bit, and we're right on that line. So now all we have to do is push that pellet into the pellet receptacle. There we go. It's on there nice and tight. I'm going to put a bunch of talc on that sack. Make a little abstract painting here with my almighty brush. Cover up my talc to keep it from spilling, because that would be bad. And I put a little bit of talc on this pellet pusher as well, just so everything doesn't stick. There, push it right in there, and then I should be able to fold this. I should be able to fold this back on itself. Sometimes it works, sometimes not so much. The trick is getting it started. It's like rolling up your pants cuffs, and the pellet pusher really helps. There we go. The key is to try to get that pellet pusher to stay on that pellet as you're pushing the cuff back. There we go. And right up that little ramp, just like that. So it's a little bit ragged there, but this is the part right here where that little ramp is that clamps into the inside of the barrel, and that holds it together. So now we can put that in the barrel, but we're going to do two things. We're going to add some silicone grease, silicone oil to the end of that cuff so that it slides into the barrel without kinking, and I'm going to put some silicone oil on those threads to help it go in easier. Need a little bit of a gripper. I need my tool, and we put the tool on the pump, and we twist and turn and get that cuff going. Get the thread started, and I'm going to work it through slowly with a little bit more grease. And the reason I'm using so much caution is because I don't want to cross thread anything back and forth just to make sure it's going smoothly, and I don't want to crack anything either. And that oil on the inside is allowing that cuff to turn easily inside that barrel and not snag or double up or twist. Just hand tight. And you should be able to see that working. I can't see it right now, but you should be able to. Yeah, I use my light on it, and I can see that pump going in and out. So that should work. Now we can put, I thought I'd lost it, but I had it in the pen flush bath. So now we can put that blind cap back on, and I can go at that barrel, sand out that scratch right there. Seems to be the only one on the pen. And that little bit of a wow right there, there's a little bit of a gouge out of the top of this barrel right there. I don't know how that might have happened. It looks like it's almost melted. So God knows what happened to this pen in the past, but that looks a little wonky right there. So hopefully we'll be able to sand that out as well. So here I have some 400 grit sandpaper, flexible, and I'm just going to go at that scratch that's right. Well, there's a little bit on this side too. There's a gouge right from there across to there. Let's see if you can see it. There it is. It's pretty deep. It's almost as deep as the engraving. And I'm going to avoid that imprint right there. I think I will take a section off of this. So I've already polished that. Once you start sanding it, you can see where the line is a lot easier. And I'm going to need my eyes for this. There you can see the biggest part of that gouge outlined in white. It's sort of curled around here, getting the lighter parts first. And I want to avoid sanding down those threads right there, because that'll make the cap difficult to cap. There we go. And I got that scratch all the way out, and I found another one right there. Now, to even out those 400 grit scratches that I've just put into that pen, I'm going to work through all of my levels of micromesh, starting with 2400 and moving up through 12,000. And then I'll finish up with some polishing compound and polish. Find the imprint first and go around it. And here we go, after all the micromesh and some polishing compound. Here it is, looking pretty good. Can't see any of those gouges anymore. Section's all nice and shiny, and I'm convinced that little gouge right there was caused by someone trying to get that pump off. There's a little bit, as you turn this, there's a little bit of a wow that goes around there. So it looks like that celluloid has sloughed a little bit after it's been heated too much, and so it kind of shrank and expanded and sloughed down. Very, very minute, but when I spin it, I can see that it's not completely circular. But because I've sanded it down with the micromesh and a little bit of sandpaper, that blind cap seam is almost invisible. So now, because I got my polishing compound out, I'm going to polish up that ebonite feed just on the visible side. And I'll blow those fins out and then run this through some pen flush in the ultrasonic. But as you can see, that's now nice and shiny. So I've soaked both the feed and the breather tube in the pen flush and then rinsed it out. Use a little compressed air to make sure that channel is open. Same thing with the breather tube. I got some water into an actual hypodermic needle, the one with the pointy tip, and inserted that in there and flushed it with some pen flush and then clear water as well. So that channel is clean as a whistle. And we insert breather tube in there so it doesn't move. We can put our polished up nib together with our now clean as a whistle feed. There we go. Line those guys up. Make sure we have our gripper materials, and we're going to put this nib back in the section. I always turn it until I find the path of least resistance, because that's probably where it rested for 70 plus years. Then I'll grab my gripper, grip my grabber, and grab my gripper, and we're going to push. Oh, that didn't work. Try it again. Try to line that up, grab it with my gripper. Yeah, and we're going to try this again. So I've lined that nib and feed up so that that little breather hole in the feed lines up with the little notch in the end of the gold nib. Grab the gripper, grip the barrel. Yeah, still a little tight. I'm going to get, this always works, a little bit of 400 grit just on the tail end of the ebonite feed. See it turn a little bit brown. That's ebonite. And I'm leaving a little bit of that ebonite dust on there. Acts as a little bit of a lubricant. That hole isn't actually drilled in the exact center either. Everything was done by hand back then. Feed was probably made on a Friday. So we'll try it again. Really does not want to go in. Okay, I've stopped counting now. Let's just keep trying. Now the first thing I want to do, once I've got it in, is check on the status of that nib. It's not too bad. It's cut slightly asymmetrical, as I mentioned, and it's still slightly wonky. But with it in the feed, you can use the feed to purchase on it and bend it a little bit and pray that those tines don't pop off. There we go. That's a Russian disease. Pretty much back together again. I'm seeing some marks here that I'm going to want to get at with some polishing compound. There we go. That polished out nicely. So the pen is ready to fill. But I think what the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to dip test that nib first and see how well it writes, because then if I have to take that section off again, I'm not full of ink and it makes it easier. So let's see about dip testing this nib. It's a pretty tiny pen, needs to be posted. There we go. So this is a 1947 Parker Vacumatic silver pearl, and it has some scratch. Does it have some bounce? Yeah, it has some bounce too. This would be a fine nib. Flow isn't too bad, but you can feel that scratch in that direction. That's because those tines are still misaligned, so I'm going to work on that a little bit. Okay, I've worked on this for about 15 or 20 minutes now, cajoling those tines to line up. The main issue, I don't know whether you can see this on camera or not, but the main issue is those tines are asymmetrical. Not only is the nib slit cut slightly off center of the breather hole, it's cut at a bit of an oblique angle. And the tines were misaligned slightly, and that angle made it really, really difficult. So let's see whether it's going to write this time any better. Not scratchy, lots of feedback, a little bit there, yeah, on the angles. But I've got them together to the point where I think I can put some micromesh on that. Okay, back again. Gone through about 3-4 levels of micromesh, all the way up to the 12,000 grit, and I think I've got it writing better. 1947 Parker Vacumatic silver pearl debutante. It has a 14 karat gold nib, and it is definitely a fine. It's pretty good for wetness, and it's got some good feedback, but it's very smooth right now, and it's not flexible, but it has some bounce to it. Nice nib. And all of that's on one dip. I haven't even filled the pen yet, so let's fill the pen. Well, first thing I want to do is get out my scales. See, what's that you're playing? Scales? Never heard of them.
What are you playing, Mozart?
Scales.
Scales, huh? Never heard of them.
I'm going to weigh the pen, out the cap, stay still. 6.75. Press tear, wait for bubbles. I hear bubbles.
Hey, what's a band without Bubbles? Hey, Bubbles, come over here, will you? Well, what's your favorite subject?
Poetry.
Really? Well, maybe you can help me straighten out my Longfellow.
1 milliliter of ink. Well, it's a tiny barrel because it is a debutante, but that's pretty good for a small pen. 1 milliliter of ink, I must say, and I do say. There we are. 1 Parker Vacumatic Debutante back from the dead. So what are my thoughts on this pen resurrection? Well, you learn something new with every pen resurrection. This one looked like it was going to be a cakewalk. There weren't any deep gouges in this pen, and the nib looked really nice. But then the pump filler mechanism ended up being a bit of a pain. So I used this resurrection as an opportunity to replace the one that came with this pen with one that I had broken before. The pellet receptacle I had broken on a previous pump, and I'd bought replacement receptacles for them. So I thought, well, here's a great opportunity to try that out. It's the first time I've ever done something like that, and the first time you always learn something new. What I learned was you have to put everything on first before you glue it. I put the receptacle on that post and glued it first before I reattached the spring. What you didn't see on camera was that I spent a good half an hour with some needle nose pliers and some dental tools to try to tease that little spring back into the hole again. And then I had to tighten the spring to make it work properly. So there was a good hour's worth of work there that I didn't want to subject you to, but if I had put the spring on first before I put the cup on and glued it, it would have been so much easier. So, lesson learned. And what I got out of this resurrection is a beautiful 1947 Parker Vacumatic Debutante in gorgeous silver pearl. Look at that. Just the chatoyance on that pen is just remarkable. And now it's all polished up. The silver looks great. The gold nib is working perfectly now. And so I'm calling this a success. Don't ask about buying this pen. It has already been sold. In fact, it was sold before I even started restoring it. Someone had an eye on it and emailed me and said, I'll buy it no matter what happens to it. So even if I had broken it, I probably would have given them a deal, but even if I had broken it, they would have purchased this pen. So I've had it out for a while. Let's see whether it actually will continue to write. Yeah, and it writes nicely. Look at that. Just smooth as glass. Beautiful, wet, fine line. And there you have it. If you like this video, please like and subscribe, and don't forget to ring that bell to get instant notifications whenever a new video is posted. And you can join as a member of my channel as well for only 99 cents a month, less than the price of a coffee. And you get cool emojis, badges, sneak peek unboxing videos, as well as instant access to my videos the moment I post them. And that just leaves it for me to say, thank you for watching. And that's all she wrote.
I made this.